Welcome, Titan 6 Actual and 3GX Mental Performance. Welcome you to Breaking Barriers Beyond the Finish Line. I'm your co-host, Lou Greco from Titan 6 Actual, and alongside me is the brilliant Sarah Grippi-Snyder from 3GX. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the human spirit, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. So whether you're an athlete, an entrepreneur, or simply someone seeking inspiration, this show is for you. We'll explore stories of triumph, setbacks, and unwavering determination that propels us forward. As a retired Army Engineer Reservist, I've faced challenges on the battlefield and beyond, and now I'm on a mission to help you discover your inner Titan.
And I'm Sarah, also known as Coach Grip, a mental performance coach. Together, we dive into the psychology of peak performance, mindset strategies, and how to overcome mental blocks. Whether you're aiming for the podium or simply striving for personal growth, we've got you covered. Join us as we explore the intersection of physical and mental strength, share expert insights, and celebrate those who go beyond the finish line. So grab your headphones, lace up your sneakers, and let's break barriers together. Remember, it's not just about crossing the finish line, it's about what lies beyond. Welcome to Breaking Barriers Beyond the Finish Line. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes where we'll feature incredible guests, share practical tips, and ignite the fire within you.
All right. So thank you. Once again, we're starting off with Sarah and I with Breaking Barriers. The mission of Breaking Barriers Beyond the Finish Line is to inspire, empower people to find their best version of themselves, help other people do the same by going behind the scenes and beyond the finish line with our next guest, Joe De Sena. Joe, thank you so much for being on the call with us today.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
All right. So, I mean, you're really a man that needs no introduction, but for the off chance that somebody is just tuning in, doesn't know you, like some of my family members, apparently. Joe is the CEO and founder of Spartan and Death Race, New York Times best-selling author, including the latest book that just dropped, Extreme Balance, that you co-authored. Excellent book, by the way. Host of your own podcast, Spartan Up, husband, father, endurance athlete, entrepreneur. I mean, the list goes on, working your way up from pool cleaning to Wall Street to Spartan and beyond, including DECA, which is a Spartan event, which it's particularly near and dear to my heart. Titan 6 Actual is one of the sponsors for all things ruck related with DECA. So it's how I met Yancey, and Yancey's the key to you being on. So thank you again.
Oh, this is my pleasure. I'm honored. You and I just met in Ocala, yes?
That's right. Yep. You met my brother and I. Yep. Yeah, took us by surprise, but it was a pleasant surprise.
I love it. Yeah. So you want a little background?
Yeah. So, I kind of sprinkle in a little bit there, but, feel free to, share your latest and greatest.
Well, so if you want to go way back, and a lot of people have heard this already, but back to the 1970s, I grew up in Queens, Howard Beach specifically. It was organized crime capital of the world. If you saw the movie Goodfellas, that is depicted in the movie. No one was really focused on health and wellness back then. And my mom's mom, my grandmother, was sick. She had cancer. My mother was seeking with her sister a different way to try to save their mother. And they walked into a health food store. They met a yogi. The yogi believed in meditation and yoga and eating a vegan diet, and happened to also believe in long distance running. And so this particular yogi convinced my mother and her sister, my aunt, to completely pivot, turn their life around 180 degrees and take on the lifestyle that he was proposing. They started running 10 miles a day, and they started doing yoga. They started teaching yoga. They started teaching meditation, doing meditation, but all at an extreme level. I mean, my mom, I remember her fasting and meditating for 30 days straight, right? Like she was.
Which I got to say is kind of interesting, right? Because you're growing up Italian in New York City. It's got to be such a diversion from what you're used to and growing up, right?
It was bizarre. It was embarrassing. I wanted no part of it. I was a young kid. My friends had eggplant parm heroes and Frito-Lay's chips and dirt bikes. I had guys with beads around their necks and orange robes in my living room and chanting. And I couldn't even explain it. Didn't want any part of it. My dad didn't want any part of it. My parents got divorced. My mother ultimately moves us to Ithaca, New York. I was 13, and her reason for that was they were more forgiving up there. There were a lot of professors that taught at Cornell, taught at Ithaca College. It was just more of a hippie-ish, open-minded environment. I couldn't wait to get back to the neighborhood. I wanted rolls of $100 bills and a Cadillac and respect and all the things that the big guys had. And I pushed against it pretty hard. Fast forward, somehow I end up on Wall Street years later. My mom is sick, just like, years earlier when her mom was sick, and triggered something to start doing yoga and start, it was early 90s, start getting healthy, started doing these races, these crazy races. And I participated all over the world, and I fell in love with it. And I started realizing, oh my God, my mom was right. Less cannolis and more yoga. And so that was really the beginning of Spartan. And it was contemplated while I was out there competing. 2001, 24 years ago, I was in the middle of a race, and I thought, man, if I could turn this into a business, if I could somehow support myself, find a wife, marry a woman, have children, grow a family, but do this,
Do all that.
Yeah, it would be
Right.
it would be so awesome relative to sitting on a training desk, grinding, having all these crazy fights with people every day, like. And so that was the impetus that started it in 2001.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge departure from everything that you picture in Wall Street or corporate America, and just diverting completely to being something as massive as Spartan Race, and then, like you said, taking that passion and turning it into a business. So that's incredible. So all right, so you decided to change paths, and that change had to come with some challenge. So, like, what kind of challenges did you face in making that change?
Well, I played it safe from 2001 when I had the idea. I kept both feet on Wall Street, but I started to dabble with this race business. The first race we put on was with Richard Branson down in the British Virgin Islands. It was a 350-mile race. It was right after September 11th. We shouldn't have went forward with it, but my convincing myself was, I'm not going to let that act stop normal life. That was a common mantra back then. So we held the event anyway. I lost the guy for 8 days, but I didn't know I lost him. It was one of the men on the staff had cut his leg while he was setting some ropes, and the other members of the staff told him to go back to Tortola, the other island, take a little dinghy, a little boat, go back to Tortola, go get some stitches. Apparently, when he got in that boat and he went to start the engine, it didn't start, and a storm rolled in, and nobody was paying attention, and he drifted away, and he drifted for 150 miles.
Wow.
And at the end of the event, they told me they couldn't find him. I lost my mind. I got the Coast Guard involved. I borrowed Richard Branson's helicopter. My father-in-law was an ex-Navy pilot. We went out and search and rescue mission, and 5 hours later we found him. He had drifted 150 miles to a deserted island, Little Tobago, and survived on water bottles that drifted there, as well as crabs. And so I was thankful that he was alive, and I was thankful that I wasn't getting sued or going to jail, and somehow started envisioning putting on a second event and a third event. But again, both feet were still on Wall Street. I was still making a living. So I hadn't taken too much risk yet, outside of the risk I just described. And then by 2009, if you remember, there was a financial crisis, 2008, 2009. I realized that I was burning so much cash, trying to put on races, this hobby that I had, with so little revenue. And I just really couldn't convince people to do hard stuff. the internet wasn't as big as it is today. CrossFit wasn't as big as it is today. I just couldn't get people to do this stuff. And my format, the races I was putting on were all 300, 500, like they were crazy races.
They're massive. Yeah.
They were massive challenges. So no wonder people didn't want to sign up. 2009, coming out of financial crisis, I said, I'll take one more shot at it. Change the name. We changed the name from Peak to Spartan. Lower the distance, no longer, 350, 500. We'll do 3 miles, 8 miles, 13 miles. And like 700 people showed up. And I thought, my God, this is more people than I've had an entire preceding decade.
Right.
And so there was something there. And then it grew and it grew and it grew. And then this thing called Tough Mudder showed up on the scene. And it was an enviable competitor, and they were coming after me hard. And we grew it. And 2019, right before the pandemic, I could pound my chest and say, we finally figured this out. We're humming. We got money in the bank. We can be a little complacent. I could finally relax for a second. And the pandemic hit. And,
right.
and the pandemic wiped us out times 10.
Yeah, it's indescribable. I mean, it's literally the proverbial punch in the face. So with that, I mean, how did you adapt? How did you adapt, especially on the fly? I mean, everybody, that recalls how COVID unfolded. It was like one hit after another. It was just, the next news story, and the tracking on the news was always, how many deaths, how many ventilators, we can't get enough ventilators in this hospital and that hospital. And, the panic is ensuing, there's lines outside of, grocery stores and things. So like, how did you adapt on the fly?
As you were just describing that, I'm remembering a friend of mine from Wall Street calling me very, very early. It was probably December or January. Okay. Country got shut down in March, I believe.
Yep.
December or January. My buddy called me from Wall Street. I just remembered this as you were speaking. And he said, there's something going on in China. We got to keep an eye on this. I think this is going to be big. And, I brushed it off like,
right.
This guy's
it's so far away.
He's a worry wart, but he nailed it. My buddy Jason. Anyway, I was with Gerard Butler. I was in Sparta, Greece. We were lighting the torch for the Olympics. It was coming through Sparta. We were getting together with the staff, the folks that produced and directed the movie 300.
Right.
And the mayor of Sparta. It was awesome. I went to bed. My phone blew up at 4 a.m. and the United States was closing. And if I didn't get home, and everybody was getting in touch with me, you got to get home. You're not going to be able to get home. And I thought to myself, I got to just do my 300 burpees. And I went out on the rooftop where I was, and I looked out over Sparta, and I did my 300 burpees in peace. And then I got in a car, made my way to Athens, flew to Heathrow. And I there was a layover for like 7 hours in Heathrow as all this was unfolding. And the door was closing, right? Yeah. And I called a friend of mine, and he said, I don't know, my friend owns Saks Fifth Avenue, pretty successful guy. And he said, I don't know, but conserve cash because you're going to need it. And then I got back to the States, and I woke up the next day, and I guess for me, it was business as usual in the sense that I was still going to get my workout on. I was still going to wake up early. I guess we'll start doing some videos so we can stay in touch with our audiences if the races are going to be canceled for a couple of weeks. Can't be more.
Because nobody knew how long this was going to go. You're like, this is just a blip. It's going to pass, right?
It can't be more than 2 weeks.
There's no one can fathom.
No one would stay indoors for more than 2 weeks. So anyway, I started doing workouts, live workouts, figured for 2 weeks. And I don't know, I was doing like 4 or 5 workouts a day. I had my kids involved. We moved back up to the farm and hunkered down. And then it went from 2 weeks to 3 weeks to 4 weeks. And it was really a slow moving train wreck. I just didn't know how terrible it was going to be. I mean, in our best year ever, maybe let's say we made $15 million. We had $15 million in profitability. And this thing cost us well over $100 million that we didn't have.
Right.
So like, you're talking about 7 years of perfect profitability to pay it back. 7 years.
Right.
And I remember slowly, we borrowed from the government. We did everything. We put more money in personally, which was, irresponsible because I got a family at that point. I haven't made money with this thing for myself yet. Everything we made went back into the business. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like it took 19 years for me to make this thing work. And now I got to do it again.
Right.
I got to do it a second time all over again.
I can't even imagine.
So I would say the worst moments were yet to come. Those were bad moments, but the worst were yet to come.
So through that, I mean, all right, so you're adapting on the fly and you're like, I got to roll with the punches. I'm one that definitely goes to like, all right, I need to vent. I need to escape. I need to collect my thoughts, and I'll dive right into fitness. That's definitely all right. That's where I'll get a mental break, but through that mental break, the ideas start coming. They start flowing, especially if I'm like out working out with somebody. Because I did the same thing. I went out and was like, well, I can't go to a gym, so I got a ruck, I got a sandbag, I've got some free weights. We'll figure it out. Let's do something in the driveway, and then the creative juices start flowing, right? But through that adaptation, like you're resilient. Like what do you think? Where did your resilience come from?
Well, I mean, I go way back, right? Like I've been talking about this recently. I actually did a long run with somebody recently. We had a lot of time to talk, and I thought, if you think about it, as a young kid, I'm watching my mom do these unbelievable things that I don't want any part of, whether it's fasting and meditating for 30 days, or right, fighting, and she's fighting the whole world. That's a sign of resilience, right? She's up against everybody doing something she believes in.
Yep.
On the other side of it, though, I'm seeing guys go away for 25 years. They're going to jail. People I know, right? Like people dying. People I know. There's this undercurrent of like, you don't rat, you don't talk. That's a resilient trait. They're not talk, don't speak, right? And so I guess I grew up around it. I grew up around this idea that like, maybe you weren't doing push-ups and pull-ups every day, but like it was a tough mindset.
Sure.
And if you had that mindset and those attributes, you could be a boss. Everybody wanted to be a boss. If my neighborhood had a bunch of tennis players that had won Wimbledon and had big houses and nice cars, that's what we would have all wanted to do as kids.
Sure.
Because a kid wants that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how did that guy or girl get there? And it was being tough. It was being resilient. It was that ability to just take the punches and not say a word.
Yeah. So even if it wasn't necessarily being taught in, as a lesson, you were just surrounded and immersed by this culture. And how incredible is it that your mom was so resilient and you got to see that firsthand in a positive way? So yeah, all right, all the mob stuff and yeah, that's negative. Once you kind of take that step back, you grow up a little bit and you start to realize, okay, but there are some traits that you're like, no, some of those are positive traits that you can still extract. And it's like, everybody can teach you something. Some things what not to do, though, right? Others of what to do. So, I mean, it speaks a lot. Sorry, Sarah, you were going to say?
No, you're good. I don't know if you noticed me. I'm just over here writing a bunch over here, just kind of I guess to explain what
how me and Lou's like dynamic work. He kind of asks the questions, you answer, and then I'm over here. I'm the one that analyzes. I kind of see the deeper meaning behind it, because a lot of people hear these stories, but then they don't take the concept of like how you were shaped as a kid and how you were shaped now in doing all these certain things. So like I'm over here kind of just like wanting to add a little emphasis on specific things. So if you don't mind, if I can go back a little bit on your story and kind of explain to like where we are, how I like kind of heard what your story is right now. Does that sound like a plan?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. So one of the
She's the
things
brains, by the way.
yeah, I'm the mindset girl, I guess. But I was listening to you talking about how your mom was like pushing yoga and you didn't really want anything to do with it. And eventually, once you said that you're like your mom ended up getting sick, something triggered into you to like want to do that again. And you realize like this is a breath of fresh air. And I'm sure there was like a small portion of connection where when you were doing the yoga, you felt like you were there for your mom at the same time. So it was like a little bit like multi-purpose where this one portion, like this one life situation happened to you. You saw something that you kind of pushed away as a kid, but then you reconnected with it, and it probably meant more at that point in time, where back in the day, you just weren't ready to do that yet. And something that we like talk about with people, it's like everybody has a choice, and sometimes you're just not ready for that yet. It's not a big deal on it, but being aware of like how to like change those steps whenever that happens, meaning like your mom got sick, you got triggered into yoga, and like all that resonated with like, how can I have a business doing these hobbies and also like make revenue and have a good time doing my hobby at the same time? You were able to create that lifestyle. And within that lifestyle, like a lot of people think they have to go to their 9 to 5, and maybe it's just finance because that pays the bills, but their true passion is painting, or maybe it's acting or something like that. But right now, that's not paying the bills. I thought it was really cool that like no matter what was happening, meaning like you said 9/11 was happening and you went off on normal life, like, hey, things are happening here, but at the same time, I can't stop going. And I wanted to relate that to a very similar sense of whenever the pandemic hit, kind of went business as usual, didn't really panic. You kept your cool and composure. Of course, the situation got a little bit worse. And then those thoughts of like, oh, I did this for 19 years. I got all this revenue and now I have to do it again. That's devastating at that time. But within the resilience of you being a kid going through all of that, like you said, you grew up around it. You saw your family and friends going to jail and dying. And you said you saw your mom doing all these things. Like basically all I'm saying is like it ties into why you are the way you are now. Like it's cool to see these things. And I think people discredit that sometimes when we go to like a restaurant, we don't treat the waitress as a human being. It's like, do you not realize there's more under the surface than them just working? And it's really cool to see all this, because I think when people see Spartan, they just see once again what's online. They go off of the rumors, but did anybody ask how Joe is? How are you doing? So like those are certain things that I'm thinking about over here, and it's like, yeah, we're right. Like nobody really, like, I know that you've had interviews and podcasts talking about it, but the people that seem to be angry, are they coming here asking you input and trying to get answers? Probably not. They're just looking at something on social media, hoping that that's going to fuel their fire, and then they're just going to be more mad for no reason. Um, but anyways, that's my long explanation of why I was writing all this stuff down, because it's just fascinating to see the different changes from how you started versus now. And then the last point I wanted to bring up is you talked about you couldn't convince anybody to do the original distance. Did you say 300 miles was the original distance?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really hard to commit to. And the fact that you made it multiple distances now out of nowhere, it's kind of like you with yoga. Like, I don't want to do this. This seems ridiculous. And then eventually something happened where you looked at it differently. Oh, that's something I could do. I could train for that. So I just wanted to also point out like your yoga experience is very similar of how people started coming to your races. They finally were committed to it, but that choice in the beginning, they just weren't ready yet. So there's just so many different gears and factors behind the scenes that nobody sees that I just wanted to point out, and I applaud you for it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
So it, let me rewind a little bit. So
Yeah, where do we end?
well, it's an interesting point because, you want people to do hard things, right? You want them to take on those massive challenges, 300, plus mile races. At the same time, you recognize, to Sarah's point, well, wait a minute. What's hard for me may be a barrier too high for others, but I could still make it hard for other people, still make it challenging to get them off of the couch. And I love that mission, by the way, getting them off of the couch and just, giving them an opportunity, whether it is, a shorter distance, a longer distance, peppered with obstacles on the side of a ski slope. And, you're going to get this wide array of athletes that are each going to find their hard. They're going to find their strength and resilience, on that course. So I think it's pretty incredible, being able to take a step back, like, and seeing the bigger picture. And we're all the beneficiaries of that decision, that you did scale it down, but then still provide those really hard challenges for people to show out for.
Yeah. And by the way, that transition from 350 miles to 3,813, that was a tough transition for me in my mind. I felt like I was selling out. Like it had to be, for it to be transformative, for it to get people right to the edge where they would, give up drinking, get back with their husband, get back with their wife, lose a bunch of, it had to be like ridiculous. It had to be like surviving in the Sahara. But turns out I was wrong. It's exactly what the doctor ordered, what we have right now as far as distance goes. By the way, somebody gave me a fortune cookie before I came in here. I think we should open it and just see.
Go for it.
What do you
I
think?
like it. I like it.
This could be fun. Hang on.
It's going to be like, you're going to have a good day today, or you're going to be on a podcast.
Let's see. Hang on. I'm getting so old. I got to wear glasses to read this little fine print.
Don't make it easy.
I'm wearing my reading glasses.
It says you will become even more resilient. I love it.
Stop it. Really?
Yeah.
What are the odds? Oh my God.
See, they are listening. We knew.
The world it's not just Facebook.
The universe hears us.
Yes. But it's an interesting point. You're like, it is exactly what what the doctor ordered, so to speak. Having those shorter and longer distances and giving people something that is just outside their comfort zone. I think you kind of talk about that in the Extreme Balance book. Is like, you're asking them just finding something just hard enough or just tough enough, I believe, to take you out of your comfort zone. What was what sparked that thought?
Well, it was my own transformation that had occurred, right? The races I was participating in where I would just get to a place where I was broken, did not want to take another step. And then somehow got to the other side, got to the finish line, got home, and was like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And I got to do it again. And I got to rope people to do it with, like, I did. It was my own experience, and I wanted to share that with the world.
Yeah, that I kind of went through that thought experiment on a ruck recently with a buddy, and we were talking about because the Titan ethos is growth, purpose, and servant leadership, and we're like, what do you think comes first? Is it growth or purpose? And we were kind of going, just playing back and forth, like no wrong answers, just what do you think on this? And like, people think they have to have the purpose, the motivation first. And I think you've demonstrated that. No, you just have to make that decision, put a date on the calendar, right? You just have to make that decision first. That's where you're at the crossroads. And, where you want to go from there. Yeah, after that, you got to take action or your words mean nothing. But it's that moment of I've had enough and what am I going to do to change it? And I think, we kind of landed on it with the ethos in the right order accidentally, and it was a happy accident. And that's, you got to decide that you want to grow whatever that growth is, whether it's just that 1% better than who you were yesterday, and not against necessarily anybody else. Nothing against competition. That competition is great, but who you were yesterday is the best competition there is.
1% better. I like that.
Yeah, we talk about the 1% a lot too, don't we, Lou? Like on how to do that. So I did have a question for you, Joe. Like if we're talking about the 1%, what are like small things that you do? It can be business, it can be daily life. It doesn't really matter where you do it, but how do you get that small little bit of that small change that's manageable for you? It could be a little bit too much for somebody else, but it doesn't mean that, anybody else can't do it. So what's your 1% every day?
And I have my routines, and just by definition, those routines become easier because you just do the same thing over and over, whether it's the cold water in the morning or the workout. I guess my growth every day, I'm cheating in a sense because it's coming from outside influence, right? Like the challenges and the obstacles are being thrown at me all day, every day from outside. I don't have to erect them. I don't have to manufacture any adversity. I got it, between all the shit that goes wrong owning and running a business on a daily basis, I have my fill of challenges. And just making it home each day, I gain growth. I gain 1%. And I think it dulls my edges a bit, right? It makes me more humble. There's a whole bunch of benefits that come from it, and I just gotta make it through each day, and I get 1% better.
Yeah, and since you're aware of that, like being able to make it home, hey, adversity is always coming at me. Like I don't have to like find it. There's a lot of things that you already kind of tackled and you understand. And then when you get home, it's more like that feedback portion of just, hey, my day went smoothly. I didn't have too many headaches, whatever your little list is at home, that 1% is huge. But once again, like I just like to emphasize on when we do those certain percentages, putting meaning behind it, because if we feel like, oh, like just getting home at the end of the day, that's good enough for me. Well, what happens if like, let's just say you're supposed to clock out at 5 and one day you get home at 11, like that might not be the best thing every single time, but how do we look at the feedback portion? It's like, okay, well, I did an extra project during that time. I might've had to stay a little bit later, but I don't have to do this for tomorrow. 1% better right there. So just making certain situations when times are tough, because we all know life is a roller coaster. How do we make it acceptable at that point in time?
Well, I like to say, I'm alive.
Mhm.
I'm alive. I'm not in jail. I have a family. Like, what I mean? I can't complain about anything, whether I get home 11 o'clock at night, whatever. It still beats the alternatives. It beats being dead. It beats being in jail. It beats, right? Like, so that perspective, by the way, helps you get through the tough times, right? Like,
Yeah.
I always say a person that has everything appreciates nothing. A person that has nothing appreciates everything.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
So if you could, sorry to interrupt, if you could keep the mindset of having nothing, even when you have stuff, like you'll have gratitude towards whether you get home at 11 o'clock, 5, like you'll gain gratitude with every, around every corner.
Mm-hmm.
there's a daily mantra that I say to myself in the mornings. There was a time in your life that you prayed for what you have now, and that is what keeps me humble, because or thinking about like not taking for granted what I have, all the little things that we can all list off. So, having a mantra like that, I think, is important to keep us centered, grounded, and humble.
Agree.
So once again, Yancey was, behind you being able to come on. Got to give a big shout out to Yancey Culp from DECA. And his question for you, I definitely want to get to this, is, and you kind of touched on it, but he said, I think it would be incredible for folks to understand a day in the life of Joe at the peak of COVID, like choose, one of your worst days. He gave some examples of like things that he remembered, but we'd love to hear, just take us through a day.
Well, I got up every morning at 5. I did my live workout, did a second workout, got on the phone with folks to try to figure out how we were navigating through hell and making payroll, et cetera, with no revenue coming in. Did another workout at night, live. A lot of workouts, which was great because it kept me sane. But I think the lowest point, I remember getting a phone call from vendors saying they were going to kill me because we hadn't paid them, like literally send people to my house. I think the lowest point was the Wall Street Journal called, and the Wall Street Journal wanted to do a cover story for the bankruptcy section and talk about how we weren't going to make it. And it would probably get, the Wall Street Journal a bunch of clicks and traffic, which is good for news folks. But for the life of me, I kept thinking, like, how could this be good for humanity? I don't understand. Like, anyway, navigated that one. I remember putting on our first race coming back, and we were in Florida, and there were people just coming up and just crying, literally just crying that they were back outside and they were doing the thing they love. And so that was special. I remember that like yesterday. And then, since it opened back, it's just been it's been like Sisyphus. I just carry a heavy stone up the mountain and it falls down every day. And I got to carry it up a little further, and then every day. That's what it's been like.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, I mean, that's Joe as the CEO. What about as husband and father? What's that been like?
Well, I don't separate. I don't, rightfully, wrongfully, I don't separate work life. I integrate it. It's just one big mess. So they were living it. They saw it. They probably didn't feel it as much as I did, but they're in it.
They were in the trenches with you.
They're in the trenches.
And I get that. So I was Army for 22 years, and there were, it was always preached to us, Army values. Well, at least when they were first formulated, and that the Army values are really just values. That it's not you put your uniform on and now all of a sudden you carry those values. No, you live those values. They become not just Army values, but your values. And you take that through, you bring that home and that same integrity to your family. So I think it's a positive, sheltering when you need to shelter them, from the daily chaos, right? But the same way that you would attack the day, it's not like you're, flipping a light switch and turning on or off your emotions or how you handle things. Your integrity is what defines you. So I agree. That's, for better, for worse, they're in it with you.
For worse and worse.
I definitely have to, I can resonate 100% with the emotion of coming back to events post-COVID. So I had recently read a story where, you had brought your kids up to West Point, and got to see World War II veteran Ralph Osterhout on his chariot. I love to tell this story because I think it was the year after you had met him. It was the first year that I got to carry him, and it was incredible, absolutely incredible. He's a great human being, great story, and he's just, he just loves to give back to folks. And same thing with Mended Swords, who organizes getting him to the event and getting all the folks that carry him. So when COVID hit, I was like, crap, I hope Ralph is okay, And after things started opening up, I called Mike Speed and I was like, hey, is Ralph coming back out? Mike Speed is the guy that put together Mended Swords. And he's like, yeah, he's going to be out there. So 2003, I got my butt back out there and got to carry him. I know he was back before that, but that was the first opportunity I was able to do it with him again. What a great experience. And so not just, Ralph, but all the veterans that come out there, all their stories, especially, like Oscar Mike is a big veteran community that gets out there and shows us all, what you can do if you just put your mind to it, and all the adversities and, challenges that they have to overcome. So I thought that was pretty incredible. I think you had mentioned how it was like a day your kids would never forget. And I can completely understand that.
Yeah, it was a special day.
What we got to do, like I said, we're the Deca Ruck, all things Deca Ruck, right? I would love if we could find a way, me, you, Yancey, get Nelson's help somehow, and get some kind of like Ruck fundraiser to raise funds for some kind of veteran organization.
Yeah, I want to have, if you're out there and you're listening and you're a veteran, veteran charity, I want to invite more and more veteran charities to come out and set up shop in the festival area of Spartan. So reach out to us, joe@spartan.com. But we could certainly do take one of our events, hopefully get 10, 20, 30 charities there, military charities, and we could do a ruck right there.
Yeah, I love
the
it.
Event. So if you know charities, let's round them all up. We'll get Oscar Mike, we'll get Mended Swords, we'll get More Hearts and Scars, we'll get everybody.
Love it. I love it. All right. Well, I have to say this has been an honor to sit down and chat with you. I think we are all we're all better for you having that strength and resilience to keep Spartan and everything underneath the mothership out here for folks like us, getting after it, wanting to do the hard things, finding ways, like we say at the beginning, it's about breaking barriers and showing other people that, we see somebody that's up on a podium or someone successful like yourself. And, when you finally hear the backstory and all the grind and the hard times and what it takes to just show up and hopefully inspire people to, they hear that story, they resonate with something. Maybe they've heard it from other folks, but this time, it was just said in a different way that those folks now can take a piece of it away. So thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for being awesome. Thanks for inviting me. You guys are great.
So now,
thank you so much.
The last thing is, I don't know if Yancey warned you, who would you love to see on the podcast next? And if we can get them on, what would that question be?
Get Rory, my buddy Rory, owns a company called 1 Year No Beer.
Okay.
Oh.
He's doing a lot of stuff with the military. Just shoot me an email, joe@spartan.com. I'll connect you and Rory. And he's going through hell right now.
Okay.
Because when we're selling, it's easier to sell beer than it is to sell the abstinence of it.
Yes.
Easier to sell comfort than it is discipline and commitment and the things I sell, right? So he's going through hell right now. He'd be a good one.
And is there a question that you'd want him to answer, or that you'd be great for the audience to hear?
He recently had to take another job. So while he's running his business, he had to go take a job, and that was really a difficult decision for him. So
Okay.
I would dive into that with him.
Great. All right, we'll do.
All right. You guys are awesome.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Thanks
I
for
appreciate
listening.
it. Thank you so much.
See you guys.
Take care. Bye.
Joining us on this exhilarating journey through resilience, determination, and the pursuit of excellence. As we wrap up this episode of Breaking Barriers Beyond the Finish Line, remember that the finish line is really just the beginning. Keep pushing your limits, breaking down walls and reaching for the stars. So whether you're an athlete, an entrepreneur, or simply someone seeking inspiration, know that you have the power to go beyond what you thought was possible.
If you enjoyed today's episode, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more captivating stories, expert insights, and practical tips. And don't forget to share this podcast with fellow dream chasers and barrier breakers. Until next time, this is Grip and Lou signing off. Keeping breaking barriers, my friends. Remember, it is not about the finish line. It's about what lies beyond it, and it starts with you.